There's always going to be things to do as long as I'm healthy enough to do it. And the one thing, the most treasured thing in your life is your health. I'm 78 in a couple of months' time. Don't feel it, still riding a bike, still live up. And Trish is a complete freak. She was 75 last week.
Wow.
And she dances 3 hours every day. You know, we're crazy, really.
This is Legends with Bevo. Thanks to Anytime Fitness Glenelg, Renelec Electrical Services, Tiger Tennis, and SMS Gas Installations.
The great Phil Liggett, welcome to Legends with Bevo. What a pleasure it is to have you on the show. So where do we find you at the moment?
Lockdown, as I have been really since we got back from South Africa at the end of last May. We keep going in and out of lockdown. At the moment, we're locked down. And I'm at home in the UK, which is just about 40k northeast of London, out in the country. It's very nice. Never been back to the airport, which used to be the lounge at the airport was really my home. Haven't been there since last May end when we came back from South Africa. And London, which is 15 minutes on an express train, I haven't seen for 13 months. It's amazing. It's a very different life.
That is phenomenal. What about your beloved cycling? Are you able to get out and go for a cycle at least?
Well, I did a ride about 2 weeks ago, 40k, in the most idyllic, beautiful early spring weather. But since then, it's rained mostly every day, and our temperatures are very low for the time of the year, 5-6 degrees. So no is the answer. However, I am doing a virtual ride from Land's End to John O'Groats, which is across the UK, every day on an app called Full Gas. And they're Australian. And it's really given me some incentive. We ride around about 20, 30, 40 kilometers every day. And I talk to the riders as well. They've linked us up through Zoom via the app. I talk to the celebrities on it. And it's really pulled me into shape, and I'm enjoying it. It's not easy, of course, on these smart trainers when you climb 25% hills, as I've been doing up in the Lake District. The legs ache, believe me.
I can just imagine that. Can you say that app again so the viewers and listeners can run that one down for you to get involved?
They should look into it. It's a very different app. It's called Full Gas, FULGAZ.com. It's well worth looking into. It's run by a guy called Mike Lucas down in Melbourne. Somebody rides the routes with a camera on the bike, and then he puts it up on the app. So you actually feel, because of the resistance on the smart trainer, that you're riding on the real roads. You get passed by cars, you plummet down some of the mountains at 80, 90 kilometers an hour, and you can't fall off, so you can charge into the corners. If you really concentrate on your computer screen or TV screen, you really get dizzy. It's a fabulous app, yeah.
I might have to get this. Sounds very, very interesting. So, hey, speaking of interesting, I had the great pleasure, thanks to All About Entertainment, to review and watch your wonderful documentary, The Voice of Cycling. Obviously, you've been doing the cycling commentary now for 44 Tour de France's, 15 Olympic Games. One of the best, that's for sure. Just for the viewers and listeners out there that haven't seen the documentary, Phil, and we want them to go out and watch it, of course, just give us a bit of a rundown on it.
Well, first of all, Bev, I hate to say it, but Wikipedia is still showing 44, but in fact, I've now completed 48. 49 will probably be in the month of July this year. And next year, I'm hopefully going to complete 50. And then I'm hopefully going to do it from France, because this year I'm working for American television. They're taking it from London, outside of London, in the studio, because we can't get into France, really. The Americans can't get there, and so we're staying offline again. It worked well last year. We got the biggest viewing figures for 10 years. So that, I think, convinced them to stay in London, just outside of London, really.
And the documentary itself, tell us all about it. A bit of a rundown, because obviously you don't want to give too much away, but...
Yeah, no, it went on general release around Australia on the 11th of March, and the reception has been outstanding, simply outstanding. I'm so flattered, but I'm very happy for the filmmakers. Nick and Eleanor, who filmed it, they're also based in Melbourne. They followed me across 3 continents for the best part of 2 years. And then they just got back to Melbourne as the lockdown started. So they were okay, because they went into post-production. So they didn't need to be anywhere except in the office all day long. And they managed to bring the film out on schedule. But it's an emotional thing. when Nick wrote to me, which was about December 2018, soon after Paul Sherwin, my co-commentator, had passed away, he just suggested making a film of my career. And I dropped him a one-liner because I was going out to the pub. And I said, yeah, it sounds good. Let's talk later. And we did. And in the new year, in 2019, he came across to South Africa and he saw that I wasn't just a cycling guy, where there were other passions involved. And I do a lot of charity work and conservation work in South Africa. And that was his first visit to the lodge, which is actually the opening scene. You'll see the little lodge we own there, which is beautiful. And it's very wild. There's no fences all the way to Mozambique or Botswana. We're in South Africa just. And of course, we're in rhino territory, which I found out was a war zone. Poachers coming in armed with AK-47s, killing the animals and stealing the horns. So I got very involved.
Horrible.
And he started to rewrite his complete concept of the film. Then, of course, he realized that with my wife, Trish, we worked together as a team. We're married 50 years in 5 days' time.
Wow, so, congratulations.
Yeah, well, it is amazing we've survived. Trish was an athlete as well. She was an Olympic ice skater.
Yes.
And that's pretty much how we met. And so we were a team. And he saw three elements of the film now. The Trish and Phil show, the conservation work, and the bicycle riding and the involvement that cycling was my life. And the result was this incredible film, which both Trish and I watched it. He sent us the very rough finished copy to just say, is this okay? Do we need to make any adjustments? And we just sat down and watched it. We made very, very little, almost no adjustment. And the tears rolled down our face. We were looking back at a whole life of what we'd done. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. I recommend anyone go out and watch it, even if you're not necessarily a cycling fan, just to see about Phil's amazing life and what you're doing with animals, which we'll get to in a moment, because that certainly found very interesting as well, Phil. Let's talk about your commentary career, though, because like we mentioned, 49 Tour de France's, 15 Olympic Games, and you've been the voice of cycling and sport around the world for a number of years now. But tell us some of the highs and lows of your commentary career.
Well, obviously, what was both the high and the low, I guess, was the Armstrong era, when during his period of winning 7 tours, I was working for American television. Our viewing figures were through the roof. The guy was an A-class celebrity, and I was working with him on gigs to raise money for cancer, and they went terrifically well. And as you know, he pulled in $600 million over that period of time. But then came the bombshell, and the real low was when he confessed to taking drugs, and that showed us the other side of the situation. So, and of course, the media were totally convinced I knew exactly what was going on, which was a total lie. And so they were taking me down with him. At least they thought they were. But fortunately, most of my fans, virtually all of them, stayed on my side and supported me. So work has gone on. And life has gone on too. I don't see Lance now, but I've got no hard feelings against him. Our paths never cross anymore. So, and as far as commentating goes, well, my famous Tour de France was 1989, when at the start of the last stage of the Tour de France, outside the Palace of Versailles, which was the final time trial, and it was a head-to-head between Laurent Fignon and Greg LeMond. Fignon going into a short 24-kilometre time trial with a lead of 50 seconds to finish the race outside the Élysée Palace on Champs-Élysées. And I said to my co-commentator, Paul Sherwin, I said, well, who's going to win, Paul? And he said, well, it's got to be Fignon. He's 50 seconds ahead. It's not very far. He's a great time trialist, lives in Paris, and he's a Frenchman. And I looked back at the camera and said, well, I think Greg LeMond's going to win. He's going to win by 6 seconds. And we recorded the opening and sent it back to London. I was working for the British UK TV at the time. And then we drove off, and 5 hours later, we started calling the race live. So they bolted on that introduction to the front of now the live show. And when Greg crossed the line, we had his time. When Fignon crossed the line, he'd lost the tour by 8 seconds. And I remember the producer in London put the key over in my ear because I'd screamed out, I don't believe this. Greg LeMond has just won the Tour de France by 8 seconds. And he put the key over and said, next time, Liggett, get it bloody right. To which I burst into tears. I had Le Mans screaming to my left and jumping up in the air with his wife, Kathy. I've just won the Tour de France because it was such a great story. He'd been out since he last won the Tour de France in '86 because he'd been shot by his brother-in-law in a hunting accident. And he just fought his way back from a wheelchair to winning the Tour again. And then I had Fignon lying on the floor crying as well, sort of curled up like a fetus, and very sad sight. And so that was, without doubt, the one tour that sticks in my mind. In fact, Paul had done a great commentary that day, and in fact the whole tour, because he was fairly rookie on the tour commentary business, having ridden 7. And I advised him to resign straight away because he'd never get any better. I remember telling him that on the Monday morning. I said, Paul, you're never going to commentate better than that. If I were you, I'd get out now while you're winning. We stayed together for 33 years, so that didn't quite go that way.
And my condolences. I know it's obviously a little while ago now that happened, but condolences for the passing of Paul, who's a very good mate of yours, Phil. So, and at least you've got, many memories together to look back on.
Yeah, the tour, of course, is what people think I do. I get stopped in the street, not so much nowadays, but in the old days, I used to get stopped in the street and they say, what do you do with the rest of your life for 11 months when you're not talking on the Tour de France? I thought, my goodness me, if only they saw me at home with all the work I've got, But I can understand that because people who are not cyclists really only watch the Tour de France because they watch it for many reasons. And a lot of it is because I think we popularized it. We didn't just talk about the bikes. We talked about the chateau, the towns. Paul lived in France for 10 years. He rode 7 tours. He was able to talk with great knowledge on certain areas. He used to tell us about the girlfriends he used to take out. When we dropped down past a cookery shop, a boulangerie in France, and he would say, he said, let's keep going. He said, I used to go out with the girl that worked in that boulangerie, but I didn't like her father. And so, it was little stories like that which kept the public interested and not just talking about the heart rate and the watts being kicked out by Bernardino or somebody. And we made it popular. But they thought once the tour was over, I put my feet up and rested on the money I'd end up for 3 weeks and didn't work again till the following year. Well, didn't quite work out that way. But I can understand the theory behind it.
And speaking of the birds, again, I don't want to give away too much in the documentary, but one thing I found very interesting is your love for bird watching, Phil, and how you relate that to the Tour de France. For people out there, tell us more about that.
Well, my life started out with my first love was animals. And I think, it probably still is first love, is animals as conservation, particularly now. Now I've got a little bit of money. I'm able to give it away and I'm able to help people in conservation, which is what I'm very proud of. The most recent situation is losing all the koalas on Kangaroo Island. I'm an ambassador for the Cleveland Wildlife Sanctuary, which is now the Koala Center of Excellence.
Oh, wonderful.
And in fact, I mentioned this ride across the jog to John O'Groats, and it's organised by Fulgaz. Well, Fulgaz wanted to pay me, and I said, no way. I said, I'm very happy to do this. I'm locked down, and no worries. And then as we kept on talking, I found they were very conservation conscious. I said, hey, I've just changed my mind. I said, don't pay me, but would you send a check to the Koala Sanctuary in the Adelaide Hills? By the next morning, he'd sent them $5,000. So it was such a gesture. And I tell you, the sanctuary were over the moon because they've got what we call the golden children there. And they are the babies rescued from Kangaroo Island. All the parents were burned to death in a tragedy of just over a year ago. And they're continuing to go on, So we're just we're watching them grow up now. And we're going to have a ride there too very soon, hopefully next January. From linking the Koala Sanctuary with Monata, where we're running the African project there with the rhinos, and hopefully one day they'll go back to Africa. Who knows? So but my link with birds, you mentioned, Bev, the bird life, like all my animal life and all my interest, it started because I wanted to know what I was looking at when I was a teenager. If I went out on a bike and a bird flew past, I wanted to know what it was called, because even to this day, my friends who are here near London with me, they ring me up to say, here, we've just seen this bird here. It's black. What's it called? And I'll say, how old are you? Over 70 years of age. And you don't even know the bird you're looking at. That's what happens. But I wanted to know the names. And then one thing led to another. I became a member of the Royal Society for Protection of Birds, and I'm a patron of BirdLife South Africa, because that's another, like all these associations, they need money now. It's so expensive, but they've got to. And the same Australian BirdLife, which is based in Melbourne. I've done work with those people there too, are brilliant people, because funnily enough, the Australian government is not doing enough to protect its wildlife, and that's one of its big failings, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And this is just something that I loved in the documentary, how you and Trish are so passionate about animal conservation. And we saw you did a charity bike ride for saving the rhinos. What is it about saving the rhinos that sort of makes you so passionate about them, and Trish as well, for that matter?
Well, Trish was the one that got us all involved in the rhinos, because she was a trustee on our local zoological park here, which had lots of wildlife. No rhinos, of course, lots of wildlife. And then a chap came along to the board, of which Trish was on the board, and asked for some money for his new organisation called helpingrhinos.org. His name was Simon, and they gave him just £500. He came back and reported the usage of it and asked for some more. He was doing a great job, so okay, gave him some more. And then Trish got to like him so much, she left the board of the trustee board of the zoo and went to the board of Helping Rhinos. I got dragged in over the next couple of years and became the patron. And now we're looking back well over 10 years ago, and the organisation is pulling in some big bucks every year, and all of that money is going to rhino conservation, not just in South Africa, of course, but also in Kenya, primarily in Kenya at the moment. A place called Old Pejita, where rhinos roam freely, and plenty of them. But don't go and try and take them, because they'll shoot you if you try and poach them. And I'm all in favour of that as well.
Yes.
And so we got involved in rhino work, and we've been very lucky, because we've been we've actually taken part in a darting of a rhino to hold him steady with blankets over his eyes, because you mustn't knock them out completely with these darts, because they'd simply pass away. So they're semi-conscious while you just cut the horn off, or inject them, or look after them generally, and let them off, and off they go running again. The only thing that's going to save the rhino right now is the fact they breed very easily, because the poachers are still at it, but it's getting less. And I do believe that slowly but surely we are winning this battle. And I hope so.
That is wonderful news, and it's a wonderful thing that yourself and Trish and everyone else involved are doing, Phil. So like you said, let's hope things continually get better with this, because we all love rhinos and animals for that matter. I've got a beloved dog.
My feeling is that if we lose all our natural history and wildlife, the world will end, because it cannot keep together. It's the way it is. But and I firmly believe that the animals are indicators of life. Get rid of them, you get rid of us too.
Exactly, and they've all got so much character as well, which we love.
Yeah, I've just built a hedgehog hotel, and he hasn't come to it yet. I'll have to put the rates down so he comes in, because I haven't seen one yet. But, hedgehogs, you see, they used to be 10 a penny in Britain. Now they're becoming far from extinct, but there's a lot fewer hedgehogs around now. People go through life, never see one in the gardens, like an echidna in your case.
Oh, I love the echidnas.
They're fantastic, yeah. They are.
Yes.
I almost crashed riding through the Adelaide Hills not long ago. It's over a year now, unfortunately. When I saw an echidna scrubbing away under the trees, and I looked at him, and I was going downhill. I almost fell off.
Oh, shit, that's not good. Lucky you didn't. And your love for cycling, because I spoke about it before. You've always been a passionate cyclist. Firstly, you started off as an amateur cyclist wanting to, be a professional, and then you've turned your career, which obviously ended up being a great decision, into commentary. But what is it about cycling you love so much, Phil?
No idea. When it all started at school, I was 15, and my best friend lived just across the road, literally, from where I lived, and we were very good friends. And all of a sudden, he started riding his bike. And he was disappearing. I lived on the Wirral, which is just between Liverpool and Chester. And Chester is the gateway to Wales. And Robin, his name was, and he lives in Canada now. And he kept coming to me and saying, "Phil, you've got to come out on the bike on Sundays with us." We've been to Mulvama, we've been over to Ruthin, Denby, all these places which I'd never seen because there was no car in the family. And we're looking back now about 1959, something like that. And so I said, I'm never coming out on a Sunday on a bike, Robin, because it's the only day Mum gives me a hot dinner, a hot lunch. So I wanted to have my beef for lunch, you see. So anyway, he kept on talking about it. And in the end, I got a bike, and he took me down to meet the cycling club he was meeting about a mile or two down the road. And I went with him. Boy, I took some batterings, I'll tell you, but I love cycling. And I could do cycling. But I couldn't play cricket, I couldn't play football, I couldn't play rugby. So I was hopeless at school. I remember the games master telling me, Liggett, you're totally useless. Get out of my sight. Go and ride your bike is what he used to say in the period I should be playing cricket. And I remember I won a prize when I was leaving school for speaking English, which wasn't bad for an Englishman. And in the book was the master had signed the book, and he says, one day we'll see you in the Tour de France. I thought, wow. But of course, he never thought I'd only be there as a bystander, not as a rider, and do nearly 50 of them. But I often think of that. His name was Partington, Mr. Partington. And so he did like me in the end, even though he hated me as a sports person. But I was good at riding a bike. I seemed to be able to get the best of most. I was tenacious. I could suffer. All the things you need if you're going to be a great cyclist. So I tried to give it a go. I failed, but on the way, of course, it shaped my life. I became a journalist because I was writing about the cyclists living in Belgium, the English cyclists, because nobody else was. And I was getting paid a pittance every Sunday night from Belgium, from the railway station at Ghent, ringing England, waiting 1.5 hours for the reverse charge call to come back to me from London. It's only 100 kilometers away. And after that, I was using the money to just stay in Belgium to continue my quest to be a pro. I did get a small pro contract, but I never took it. I decided the chance of being a journalist came my way. I took it, and I never asked for a job again in my life. So I'm so.
Well, very successful decision there. I think you made the right one, Phil.
It's a hard one, though. And Eddie Merckx, of course, who became the greatest cyclist in the world, and in my opinion, remains the greatest cyclist who's ever lived. He was racing at the time. I couldn't beat him. And that was one of the reasons that made my decision. He wasn't the greatest cyclist then, but he was pretty close. He was already a young world champion. And I said, I met Eddie as a friend at his house in Brussels, and we are good friends now. And I said, Eddie, you know, you're the reason I never turned professional. And he looked at me, he goes, what? His English is, I think it's great. He thinks it's terrible. He goes, what? And he looked me from the feet up to the eyes with his head. And he said, you thought you could beat me. I said, no, I couldn't beat you. That's why I never turned professional. And we get on so well. We have a lot in common. Eddie, I've interviewed Eddie all over the world, including Australia, and the legends that we had a standing ovation when I interviewed Eddie in the conference centre in Adelaide. And I went up afterwards and said, Eddie, I don't know why you go on about you're not speaking English. You were great tonight. And he goes, no, Phil, you were good. And so the rivalry was still there, you see.
That's wonderful. And where to from here for Phil Liggett? You've done so much in the sport of cycling, like we mentioned before, and you're coming up to doing your 50th Tour de France, and you've done the 15 Olympic Games as well. But, you know, there's not much you haven't done. Where to from here for Phil Liggett?
Well, there's always challenges whatever you do. And if you stay in the mix, as I am doing, then things happen. People want things done, and I'm there to do them. It's not so much the money anymore. I want to continue my love for the animal life. The work being done in Monarto is exceptional. They've now started to turn the sods and get there's a hotel and outdoor glamping being built there for the Africans. And I will lend Elaine Benson all the help I can give. She's the CEO of Adelaide Zoo, and a lovely lady. The same with Cleveland. I shall stay working with as an ambassador with Trish at Cleveland, up in the hills there with the golden children. As far as the birds are concerned, I will always help out with the birds wherever I go. And the same in Africa, of course, because when I step off the plane into Africa, the phone starts ringing, people find I've hit town, and then they wanted me to do this. give talks, personal appearance, give all the money to the charities, which is the way to go. So there's always going to be things to do as long as I'm healthy enough to do it. And the one thing, the most treasured thing in your life is your health. Because I'm 78 in a couple of months' time. Don't feel it, still riding a bike, still live. Trish is a complete freak. She was 75 last week.
Wow.
And she dances 3 hours every day and often walks up to 8 kilometers every day. So, we're crazy, really, but we want to get the most out of life. You only get, as Jerry Ryan, the famous entrepreneur in Australia, says to me, Phil, life is not a rehearsal, and he's right. So you make the most of it.
That's a wonderful quote, and I love your attitude of both you and Trish. And you're right; your health is so important, and it's all about doing what you love and making the most of the time you're on Earth. And you've certainly done that, Phil, in your career, not only as a commentator, but with everything you've done with animal conservation as well. And what a pleasure it's been today chatting to you on Legends with Bevo. The documentary is called The Voice of Cycling. Get out and watch it; it's an absolute ripper. Phil Liggett, thank you so much again for joining us.
Bev, it's been fantastic to speak to you, mate. Thank you very much.